Hey y'all, today let's do a Shimano Saros 4000 FA. Show you how to break it down, service it, and put it back together. But let's go ahead and start with the spool and the drag. Then after that we'll jump to the bail and the rotor. Just unscrew it to get it off. And to get that drag open, we're going to pop this retaining clip out. There's an end that's open. That's what I'm looking for first, and then I'm just gonna not do that, but I'm gonna keep my finger over it while I move it in and up. Now we can just pull these drags out and check them out. Make sure they're not good. We can see it already. They're disintegrated. Okay, so we gotta change these out. Yep, that's not how it's supposed to look. Okay, so let me grab these drag washers. Okay, so you have a couple different sizes for the drags. You have one that's a kind of a thicker one, and then you have two thinner ones. This thicker one's going on the bottom. You can actually grease these if you wanted to. What I typically use is a thicker kind of grease. This is an Abu Garcia real grease. Just gonna drop that one in there first. Add some oil to it. A couple drops just around the area. Now I'm gonna stick this one on here like this, and then just oil it here versus sticking it inside and then trying to do it that way. Sometimes this works a little bit better than trying to stick it inside afterwards. I can't think it always works because it doesn't, but fingers crossed. And you don't need to fill it up. It'll over time just kind of creep into the areas that don't have any oil in it. And essentially what I'm going to do, that's how the stack looks. I think you saw what I did there. I put that piece with the prongs sticking up first, one drag washer, and then the keyed the air drag washer above that, then the final drag washer piece, and then this will go on top. Fits inside those grooves. Let's see if it works. Yeah, I think we got it. Good. Now we can just drop this on and then stick that retaining clip back on. The way you can do this is you can take one end, push one end down, lift one end up, stick that end that you have sticking down in first, and then kind of work your finger around to get the rest of it in. Just got to make sure it's inside that channel that it's supposed to be in. Alright, let's go ahead and jump to the rotor and the bail. To get to that, or to access it, we're going to pull this straight up, just like so. I'm going to leave that there for now, show you that afterwards, or at the end. Then we're going to unscrew this nut right here to pull that rotor up. And this is clockwise to remove, so you're turning it to your right. So righty-loosey in this case. Before I do, let me go ahead and pop this handle off. Just unscrewing it by turning it. Now we can just kind of pull that straight up. Alright, so now the line roller in this was bad. I can hear it when I tested it out. So we're going to replace that. I'm going to show you how to break this entire thing down. We're going to start on this side. It's not a whole lot going on here, but show you what it looks like and how to remove it. Took one screw at the bottom. That's going to be the smaller screw. And then this screw here. You're going to remove that cover so you can access another screw that's under there. So there's a screw and a washer right there. I'm going to hold on to that post right there when I unscrew this, just in case it slips out, because I need that support to kind of get it out of there. There's your washer and screw. Keep those together. And now you can just pull that out just like that. You have a little liner here, and that's your post. Now let's jump to this side. We have a bunch of stuff, same kind of deal as this side with a couple of screws over here. I'm just going to start with this part first, just so I can release the pressure off that bail spring that's inside there. And I'm going to hold down on it and just kind of gently raise it up until it comes off. Now this spring is one of those that does have quite a load on it, so it might shoot up on you like it did for me. Just be careful of that. You have a little click button there and a spring inside here. Typically these things are what you lose when you start taking your reel apart, so just be aware of that. Or you find some pieces left over and that's where it goes. Alright, so let's undo this cover. Two screws there, cover comes off. And all you have on here is just a spring with an arm. And there's a little washer on that arm. We're going to leave it the way it is. There's a larger end or larger opening and a smaller opening up here. This is where the arm is going to go through. And then you have that trip arm that looks like that. Alright, so let's undo this line roller. This is, where do I want to put this? This is fairly intricate. So let's pay attention as we do it. We'll lift it up so you can kind of see what it looks like underneath before we start taking it apart. Hopefully this comes off. Yay, it did. You have a liner there. There's a washer here somewhere. Yep, there it is. Or spacer, excuse me. Then you have this bearing that's inside here. And I don't remember which way it comes out. Might be the other way. I think it is. Yep. That bearing comes off from the back side, and that's how that bearing or that line roller is going to look. The thinner part will be facing towards the bail wire. Thicker part is going facing towards the bail arm. This entire thing right here comes apart as well. That black piece is kind of what holds it and supports it. I'm going to pull this spacer off first. That goes on this side of the bearing. Then you can pull that off, and now you have this that kind of just comes out like that. Okay, clean this stuff up as normal. Not a whole lot to do here, but besides just clean it up. I'm gonna come back to you after I replace this bearing and show you how to put it all back together. Okay, so we're gonna start with the bail arm side. I'm not gonna put this together yet. And I don't remember if there's notches here or not, or supposed to be here or not. This one may just have it because it's worn. I don't remember, and I apologize for that. But there's a couple notches on here. So when you stick this back inside here like this, just kind of rock it until you feel it hit those notches. And then I mean it's kind of supported there. You can do a little double check with this end or this end when you start putting it together, and I'll show you how to do that when we get there. Alright, so I'm going to oil this bearing first, and then I'm going to grease all these little parts up. Stick some inside there like that. I'm just going to kind of work it in. And I'm just going to you're going to watch me just kind of grease this stuff up. This is a light amount of grease, but I like to do it for these reels because we have a lot of salt water down here. And there's a couple things I didn't show you. I didn't mean to take it out, but it came out. I'm not show you what that looks like or where it came from. That little black piece right there is what I'm talking about. And I'm going to add some grease here as well on those hooks. Alright, so I'm just going to kind of hold this. Well, let me show you this first. I'm sorry. That little black piece came out of a little hole on the bottom right here. And that goes inside that hole right down at the bottom there. And you'll notice up the top, at the opposite end of that, there's a little notch right there. Those two little notches on that collar right there are going to be fitting over those two pieces. Alright, so let's get this started. Remember, I'm looking for those notches that's on this thing. I think we have them right there somewhere. Then we're just going to stick this over it. That notch down will be facing towards the bail wire. That kind of acts as a support so it doesn't really go anywhere. I think it's funky. Stick on the first spacer. And you're going to kind of have to hold these things with your hand so they don't fall off on you. Next goes the bearing. The line roller. I didn't take the bushing out of there. Then you have your last spacer, and then this little washer right here that goes on top of it. Now you want to make sure that collar or this piece right here goes inside the line roller, around the bushing that's inside that line roller. And now I'm going to take this, rest that down, add some grease to it because I didn't do it. And you'll notice on these there's kind of a polished side that's almost like kind of a beveled or curved, and then there's a flat kind of a matte side. I like to put that matte side down and have the polished end facing the line roller. I want to make sure that's set over those two tabs, or at least the very top one, which it is. And I just think that bottom one acts as an escape for water. Now at this point you'll see there's two prongs on this post. I want to make sure those two prongs fit inside the groove that's on that line roller, on the bail arm. So I'm going to stick that in there and turn it until it stops turning. And at this point it stopped turning already because I put it in right. But if you didn't, you can just kind of rotate that until you feel it's set in place and it's not moving anymore. Now I'm going to balance this and screw this in. Now at this point things kind of got loose, so we're going to make sure before we tighten anything down that we're still inside that channel that we need to be in, and we are. One more time. Yeah, we're still looking good. Now I'm just going to tighten this down. Not necessarily all the way yet, but I want to make sure it's secure because that's kind of, if leaving it loose, it kind of flaps and that might come free. And now before I forget, I'm going to stick that spring and click button there inside the hole where it came from. And to do that, I'm going to stick some grease inside that hole. This kind of helps secure or hold that spring in place so it doesn't like fly around or fall out on me when I'm working with the rest of the reel or the rest of the bail. Same thing for the top of the spring. A little dab of grease right there. And I'm going to stick that inside. And again, that just kind of helps it set in place and not fall out again. Now I can grease that channel right there where that trip arm rides on. Just to light them out. A little bit of grease inside here where that bail spring is. A little bit around the post. I'm going to drop this trip arm in first. Make sure that's set all the way to the top, just like that. And now I'm going to drop our bail spring assembly inside this groove right here, just like so. Now I'm going to cover it up. And you can snug this down the entire way. You don't need to leave it loose or anything. Okay, so now we have that end of the arm for the bail spring and that little hole right there. That's where that's going to go inside. Hold on to this and stick a little bit of grease on top of that part. And I'm going to stick a little bit of grease on top of here as well. On top of that little tab right there. Not a whole lot of stuff needed there. And now to make sure we get this in right, we want to make sure that that bail spring assembly is below the top of that trip arm assembly, or the trip arm. So I'm going to kind of hold that in place, find the hole, stick it in, double check to make sure our click spring is still in there, which it is. I'm going to kind of angle that like this as I push down, and then rock to make sure I get that set in place, which is now in place. Alright, I'm going to tighten this down right now. Make sure we're good. And yeah, we are good. Nice line, nice alignment there. Okay, so for the other side, we're just going to stick some grease on top of some places here. Some right there. A little bit on the inside right there where that liner is going to sit. I think that's kind of about as much as we're going to do besides greasing this post. And some inside that hole right there where the screw is going to go. Alright, next I'm going to add a little bit of grease right here. Some on the back side. And I'm going to drop that in place. Before I do that, notice that there's a little keyed or squared off end on this that needs to fit flush inside the receiving portion on this liner, just like so. It can only fit in one way, so when you stick it in through this end of the bail arm, it should just go through and sit flush. Drop that in first, put that over it, and I'm going to drop this in and just kind of rotate it as I go in to try to find that channel. You'll know you found it when that thing, when that end of the post sticks out just flush with that back side right there. I'm going to drop my washer on over like that, and then I'm just going to screw it in. Notice I'm holding the back side so it doesn't slip out on me. And let's make sure it works before we close everything up. Feels good, looks good. Now we're just going to cover it up. Alright, so while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and add some grease just to the bottom end of that trip arm there. Some grease around here, inside the channel, and just some on top where the nut sits. Alright, let's go ahead and do the handle knob, or the handle itself, because this handle knob is a little stiff, so we're going to open this up and see if we can fix that or loosen things up, or maybe need to replace something inside here. First, I'm going to brush some of that salt deposit and stuff off of there. I'm going to blow it. And that should be good. Now I'm going to undo these two screws at the top to open this, get this knob off. And one is longer than the other. I don't think it really matters, honestly. But just notice that on this one it was. I don't know if that's the case or not. And there's no schematic for this, so you just kind of got to play it by ear or as you go along. Take that off and let's see if there's anything inside here we can do. Nope, not a whole lot that I can do to remove anything inside here, so we're going to stick some oil in there and just kind of work that in, and hopefully that'll help free it up a little bit. Because who wants to buy a new handle when they're so expensive? And for this one I'm going to use Corrosion X versus using the Real X. It's kind of the same thing, but this one says it penetrates, so we're going to use this instead. Now I'm just going to kind of work out my fingers, try to loosen that up. And I might have to hit it a couple times after I work it in. That's feeling better already. It's good. Let's go just get this cover back up. Yeah, I don't think the screws really matter, honestly. Just think they put whatever they had in there. But I guess we'll find out when we screw this in. Yeah, that one didn't go down. So let's go ahead and make sure we find the holes that they were in. That one's a deeper hole right there. Try to kind of keep my alignment. Doesn't matter what this does, but keep my alignment with this knob so I get the screws in right. Looks like this one should be over here instead. Yep. And this one goes on this side. Yep, there we go. Alright, so I'm just going to add some grease just kind of around here. I kind of slather that on there, and then I wipe off the excess. But I kind of like to get a coat on there, so. Some here as well. Let me screw that down a little bit so we can get the threads on this. And some inside that channel. Now I just hold it together and wipe off the excess. And now we can move on to the body of the reel. Alright, to open this up, we're going to start with the boot on the bottom. There's a screw up here for it. And one down here. This top one is longer than the bottom one. And this should just pull straight down. Just be careful, you don't want to rock that as you pull it down, because you don't want to break that post off. If you do, it's not the end of the world. That can be supported by just a one screw over here, but it's there, so we want to keep it intact. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's go ahead and open this up. I'm pretty sure we can open this up. Yeah. So let's undo these 4 screws here. These might be different sizes, so I'm going to check them when I pull them out. Yeah, looks like we have 3 the same size and 1 that's going to be smaller. So we have, if you're looking at it this way, all those 3 screws are the same size, and then you have this one down here in the bottom that's smaller. Pull that straight up. And now I'm going to undo this anti-reverse by doing the 3 larger screws are the ones you're going to be removing. And hopefully this anti-reverse is going to be good. But there's a lot of, I'm going to guess, sand on it. Alright. Now for the, I just took it off. I'll show you this in a sec. For the block, we're going to undo these 2 screws on the bottom. Notice that when you look at these screws, there's one larger one on this side and a smaller one on this side. Pull that off gently. Did anything come with it? No. So you got a bushing that's inside there and no washers. This did have quite a bit of play in it. So I may add something in the bottom there to reduce the amount of play. A lot of up and down play. When you pull it, you can see it like that. I might add a washer there to kind of reduce some of that. I'm not sure yet. And now we can just pull those posts out. There's one right here and another one inside here, if I can get to it. On these posts, there's the notched ends at the top. I think they're both the same size, but I'm going to keep them separate just in case. There's notched ends at the top are up here, and those notched ends will be going up inside the reel, and the smoother ends will be facing or coming through the bottom part. Now we can go ahead and rotate this. I'm going to lift this gear out of here. I'm going to pull this pinion gear up so I can rotate it and push it out. Ooh, there's a lot of stuff going on in there. Okay, now I was going to remove this worm here, but I have a sneaky suspicion that there's going to be some issues with this lever. Don't want to go through that to show you guys, and I apologize. But to remove that gear inside there, right here, that's going to be the only way you can get it out. Nope, I think you can. Let's go ahead and pull it out and see. Pull this out. Be careful, there's washers under the bushing right there. We'll set that to the side right now, and let's see if I can pull this gear out. Yeah, that's what I thought. Just kind of like, oh, there we go. Awesome. Don't need to take that apart. That's good. Now when you pull these gears out, I'm not necessarily sure it matters so much on a lot of them, but I'm going to check this one to see. Yeah, this one is fine. You can put this in either way, I'm sure, and it should be okay. But there's little dimples at the top, or on one side, that those dimples will be facing up towards the anti-reverse, kind of like that. Okay, so what's left to remove would be this right here. Take off this rotor ring, or this brake ring right here. You don't want to stretch it too much, so just be careful. I know I'm looking a little bit gruff when I'm doing this, but I kind of know what I'm doing, so I know I wasn't damaging it by doing it the way I was doing it. And I'm just going to use a brush and clean a lot of this stuff off. As you can see, me been using this all the entire time. We have a bearing on top of the pinion gear, one on the bottom. That might be a bad one. Some reason, instead of this one going bad, this one likes to go bad all the time. Not all the time, but more often than the top one. And then for the worm, we have this bushing, and you should have some washers, at least one under there. Yeah, we have one washer under there. I think that's all you guys need to see for this. Yep, that's it. All right, so let me show you the anti-reverse clutch. Let's see how that looks, see if it's bad or not. I'm gonna pop this bearing out of here just so I can check it as well. Ooh, it's frozen. It's frozen. All right, so let's get that out. Show you what I do. Take this. There's a lot of little scars on this from over the years, because I like to use it just to stick it through. And if there's nothing blocking it, I just kind of use that and then pop it out. It works more often than not. So, but doesn't work every single time. Yeah, it's working. And this is nasty. Not good. All right, let's check the anti-reverse clutch and see if that's good. I think it's all right. Yeah, I think it'll be all right. Yeah, I think we should be fine with it. If I don't have to change it, I'd rather not change it out. If I think it still has life left in it, then we're just going to kind of leave it in there. So I'm just going to clean it up with a Q-tip until I don't have that black stuff coming off anymore. Okay, so a little bit of good news. The extra play or excessive play that I was feeling was coming from this screw for the block being loose. So we're just going to tighten it up and not even worry about replacing or adding any washers to it. I can't even fit in there. Just want to make sure that's snug. Yeah, no, we got rid of that play. I'm going to add a little bit of grease to that pawl inside there, and then kind of around the block. And I'm going to do some, just show you what I do in terms of greasing for, that was too much, for certain pieces. That should suffice for that. For the pinion gear, I like to grease the entire surface area of it. And I really only use a light amount of grease for these reels, and that's because if you use too much, it just kind of slows them down. But you can certainly add as much as you want. depending on the level of protection you're looking for. I think this will suffice, but we all have different opinions on that. Make sure I add some to the thread where that nut's going to go. And then same sort of thing for the main gear. But in terms of the body, I'm going to add a little bit of grease, just a real light amount inside that hole where that bearing was present. Excuse me, that bearing was frozen inside there. I'm just going to stick it in. This is the replacement bearing, so I don't think that's the original one. I'm going to add some oil to it, even though it's new. Just like I'm going to oil all these other bearings as well. And the good news was on this one, this bearing on the bottom of the pinion gear was good as well. So both of them were good. Only one we had to replace was this one here. Bear with me while I work these things in. That should suffice. And for this gear here, I add the lightest amount of grease. Don't need anything on there really. That's probably it. And let's make sure we didn't miss anything else to grease. I think we're good there. So let's start with putting the rotor ring back on, the rotor brake back on. We're just gonna kind of rotate it over and slip it as we go. Make sure it sits in place inside the channel. There's a channel for it. Make sure it's inside there. A little bit of grease inside here. Doesn't really need it, but as you saw on that side, you can still get things frozen in there. Drop that bearing inside. And the first thing we're going to do is stick the worm gear in. Remember the other dimples or the indentations facing up, so I'm just going to drop that back in place inside there. Now I'm going to take my post here, stick that in through the top, and you'll notice there's a channel inside right here that tab then needs to fit over. Or fit inside, excuse me. Drop that straight in so it's flush, and that's pushing down on that gear there. I'm going to stick this worm through it and just kind of rotate till I feel it push up inside that gear. Sometimes you have to hold it like this, which just went in by itself. Sometimes you have to hold like this and rotate that gear to get it to fit properly. But this one just kind of went in, I believe. Yeah, it did. Take our washer, stick that over that post right there on the worm, and then we take our bushing, and if you'll notice there's a notch on this, or a tab end. That gap or that spacing there is going to go up and it'll be flush. That tabbed end will be at the bottom, just like this. Just like that. Rotate it so it goes into the slot. Okay, I did forget to do this, so I'm going to go ahead and oil this that lever there. Just add a couple drops to the top and bottom. I'm holding on to the top and bottom of this worm assembly so it doesn't slip out of place on me. And you don't really need to add any grease or anything there, but I'm going to add a little bit of grease, like a real light amount, to the top of that post and that cam, just like that. Now the next thing we can do is take our shaft and stick that through, so we have that set in place. I'm going to stick it through here like this, have this facing up in this direction, or at least when you get to the final point you want to make sure it is. Work this gear over it. Kind of have that down there somewhere, just kind of like that. I'm going to make sure that's up inside here somewhere. And now I'm going to work this gear down so that I can fit that that bearing inside there just like that before I go any further. Because what happens is if you get too far ahead of yourself, you won't be able to get that in place. Let me see the top bearing for the pinion on. Okay, so now before I go any further, I want to make sure that I can get this this block over. So I'm going to kind of just play with this a little bit. I had to remove or pull that top pinion bearing out. Kind of get that situated close to the bottom. Make sure it's over it somewhere. You don't need to be exactly at the bottom, but just somewhere around it will work. You can always work it back up once you're in place. Now I'm going to secure the bearing at the bottom, if I can get it in there. Kind of just play with it a little bit. The alternate way of doing it is just to have that bearing inside that that hole there already before you do any of this stuff. But sometimes that falls out. So, and now since we have everything set, if you wanted it higher, you can just turn it manually with your hand to get it higher up. I'm going to leave it right around there somewhere because I still want to have room to put that gear inside, and I also want to have room for those posts that go inside there. Now I'm going to stick this anti-reverse clutch on. You notice there's two little tabs on the bottom there and two little receiving holes here. And also there's an opening here and that engage and disengage on the lever. You want to make sure that fits over the top of that cam post right there. So I'm just going to stick that on. Make sure it's set and then just secure it. You notice when I'm doing this, I'm having my hand covering the bottom part of that worm so it doesn't fall out. And that should be good right there. I'm going to drop this on, stick it over it, and just kind of turn as you work it down to get it to set in place. And before I forget, I'm going to stick this washer that came off of it excuse me, back on there so I don't forget it on the way reassembling the reel. Now I'm going to add a little bit of grease to these posts. Not a whole lot's needed. And this one came off this side, this one came off this side. I'm going to start with this side first. Stick it through this hole right here on the end. And if you can't get through the hole in the block, this is where you can kind of play with the block to move it up so you can get it through it. Make sure it goes all the way in and it's flush. So what you might have to do is play with this to get inside the hole, the receiving hole. That's flush. And same for this one. That one just kind of went right in. Now we can take our plate, cover that up. This will only go on one way. There's a notched end right there. That notched end will be fitting over the tab that's on the housing there. And remember, we had one screw that was smaller than the other. So I'm going to put the smaller screw in first. And that's going right here on this side. Snug that down, make sure it's all good. And I want to get a feel for this thing right now is what I want to do. Yeah, that feels good. Okay. I'm going to leave that open so I can go back and forth with it. Kind of like to have that play with it so I can maneuver things around a little bit sometimes if I need to. Now I'm just going to drop this gear inside, just like that. Now a couple things that we have a tendency to forget would be this. So I'm going to stick that on. It may fall out while you're working on it, but at least you know it's there. Now I'm going to stick the shims on that we took off when we cleaned the gear. Your shims may vary, or the number of shims that you have on there may vary, but this one had 4. I'm sorry, I'm just going to screw those secure with the screws and then move on to the rotor. I did the 3 larger screws first. Remember, you had the 3 larger screws on this outside, and you had the 1 smaller screw inside there. Alright, now let's go ahead and add some grease to the bottom here. Just add a little layer of protection. I'm also going to add some grease to those screws that are covered by the rub guard, because water has a tendency sometimes to just collect inside there. Stick that in like that. I'm going to start with the long screw first, which goes on this side. And you got to be a little careful with this one, because when you get to the bottom where it just kind of stops turning, and when you would typically add a couple extra turns or maybe a quarter turn, you don't want to do that here, because that could snap that post off. So once you get to some resistance, maybe go a little bit more, but you don't go much more than that. I'm going to double check it to make sure it's good. Yeah, that feels good enough. Now let's go ahead and stick this rotor on there. And I'm going to secure it with a screw. To put this or tighten the screw, you're going to go backwards or counterclockwise. And fairly snug is fine. Just don't go too much on it. Let's go ahead and stick this handle on, and we'll stick the click gear on and the spool, and then test this reel out to make sure it's functioning fine. I'm going to clean this stuff off a little bit first before we put it back on. All we have is a gear, a plate on the bottom. I'm not removing the plate. Clean all that grease out of there though. We don't need or want that. Kind of drop that over. Then we're going to stick these washers on there. And when you put the spool on, it'll set those down properly. So let's get our spool, stick that on there. Sounds better. That's good. He said he couldn't hear any noise with it, so let's test the drag first. Yeah, that feels good. Well, that feels nice. Let's test the crank out. Feels good. And the reverse works. Let's test the flip. Flip works nice as well. Alright, so if you guys found that video useful, please hit that thumbs up button and consider subscribing to the channel if you appreciate content like this, where I break reels down, put it back together, or show you how things work, and spread the word about the channel. Alright, so I'll see you guys next time.